My name is Joe Geyer and I have been doing photography for 13 years. My focus is in fine art, self-portrait, and documentation photography. My current project, titled Sorry for the Mess, is a look at mental illness through the perspective of somebody who deals with it on a daily basis. Sorry for the Mess gives an authentic and honest look at what it's like to deal with a mental illness every day. It also gives an in-depth look at what it's like to explore self through a self-portrait project, and what it means to turn inward to understand oneself. Sorry for the Mess tackles issues like ADHD, OCD, depression, and anxiety. These mental illnesses have a strong hold on my life, and I deal with them on a daily basis. The photos in this project explore how these mental illnesses affect not just myself, but my relationships and the world around me. This project has spanned across 3 states and has tackled issues within my marriage and the end of my marriage. This project is built for 3 audiences. The first one being those who don't have mental illness or have a hard time understanding it. It gives these viewers a tangible view of something they aren't able to see just by looking at the person. The second audience that this series is built for is those who do have mental illness. Oftentimes, as we are struggling through our mental illness, we feel like we're going through it alone. So I want this project to be a view for those who are struggling with it to know that they're not going through it alone. And the final audience is myself. I use this series as a way to take what I'm dealing with and put it out there in the world so I can view it and process it and understand the emotions that I'm dealing with. This project accomplishes reaching these 3 audiences by using a combination of surrealism, realism, and beauty in the mundane. The series also combines voyeurism with autobiographical work to make it more understandable for these audiences. The audience is provided a private view into the life of someone who struggles with mental illness by using both humor and very heartfelt moments as a way to connect. Some very important points of composition that come into play are the use of color, mainly the contrast of warm and cold tones. Proximity and vantage point also give my viewers a better understanding of when they are in my mental space versus the external space looking in. All of these important pieces of composition bring the series together to make it understandable for these 3 audiences and to allow them all to connect to the series in the way that I want them to. So why is self-portrait work so important within the photographic medium? Since the dawn of time, humans have been looking at themselves and trying to understand themselves through art. We document ourselves in our triumphs and our losses, and we try to use art to understand our role within the universe. From cave paintings to Hippolyte Bayard to Sig Harvey, exploration of self will always be a part of art and a way to understand who we are. Sorry for the Mess pulls inspiration from important names in the self-portrait genre. People like Kelly Connell or Nan Golden, Francesca Woodman, and Sig Harvey. As a photographer who is currently working, it is important for us to know the history of our genre. It is important to know how that history influences the current work you are doing. I attribute much of this project's beginnings to Kelly Connell. Her work in Double Life was the first time that I had seen the use of doubling as a way to explore the internal space. Nan Golden is also another photographer who has quite a bit of influence within my project. The rawness and realness of her self-portrait work from the 80s really influenced my work to push towards a more authentic look. Francesca Woodman's abstraction and symbolism within her work is another large influence that I try to put within my work. Woodman's concept of how to show self in her images has been influential in my work, in the idea that you don't always have to show your face to do self-portrait work. And finally, Sig Harvey has also been a influence within the use of her color and minimalism and light. The way Harvey combines color and light to create important symbolism, emphasis, and overall story arc within her images has always pushed me to do the same within my own. Much of her influence can be seen within the way that I use light and color. All four of these photographers, whether intentionally or inadvertently, have explored the idea of mental illness within their artwork. And in turn, they have influenced me to do that within my own photographs. With much of my influence coming from photographers in the past, where does my project fit in the future of the genre of self-portraiture? With the rise of the internet and cell phones and social media, the world is more interconnected than it ever has been. And with that, we are realizing that as people, we are more similar than we are different. We share many of the same difficulties in life. And while many of these difficulties used to be considered shameful, we're realizing that because they are more common, there isn't much shame in having them. This means that self-portrait photographers are beginning to explore things that were considered shameful, like sexuality and mental health, and our traumas. Photographers like Brooke Shaden, who explores mental health through surrealism, or Brian Claval, who explores sexuality, queerness, and drag performance through documentation, or Oscar Thomas Miles, who is exploring autism and sexuality through his use of surrealism. Like these photographers, my work also sits within the future of the self-portrait genre as I explore in an authentic way how mental illness affects me and the environment around me. Explorations of this nature within self-portrait photography will become more important as we connect with the people around us and all over the world and realize that interconnectedness allows us to understand each other better. So what I want my audience to take away from my self-exploration is the fact that even though they may be struggling with mental illness, they're not doing it alone, that there are other people out there who understand exactly what they are feeling. I also want the audience members who don't understand mental illness to take away a little bit more understanding of it so that they can have a bit more compassion for those around them. And finally, I want to take away a clarity and catharsis from this series that allows me to process what it is to have a mental illness and to deal with it daily. And as I explore, I want this series to be one of the ones that leads the way forward in the self-portrait genre, to keep pushing boundaries and pushing the way forward for other photographers to do the same.